The Devil's Dance Floor. This is a true story. In 1979, at a nightclub in Mexico, a security camera recorded something that cannot be explained. A girl danced throughout the night. Hundreds of witnesses saw her dancing with a man, but in the video she was completely alone. 4 days later, she died in a hospital room filled with the stench of sulfur. And the nightclub where it happened is still open today under a different name. But whatever was inside that building never left. Some nights are meant to be forgotten. Some decisions once made become the first sentence in the final chapter of your life. And some places, even decades after being shut down, still hold something within their walls. Something that does not belong to this world. Something that is still waiting. This is the story of Lucia Esperanza Reyes. She was 21 years old. She was beautiful. She had her whole future ahead of her. And on the night of April 13th, 1979, she walked into a nightclub called Mr. Green. She never truly walked out. Her body did. 4 days later, in a hospital room that reeked of rotten eggs and burning metal. But Lucia, the girl with the radiant smile and dreams of becoming a doctor, she vanished on that dance floor among the flashing lights and pounding disco beats. The security camera recorded everything, every step, every spin, every second she spent with no one at all. Because in the footage, Lucia danced alone, completely alone. Yet hundreds of witnesses swore they saw her dancing with a man with green eyes that burned like two emeralds set on fire. And when she looked down at his feet, she saw what no human being should ever see. To understand what happened to Lucia, we need to go back to the beginning, back to that evening, back to the small house on Hidalgo Street where the smell of fresh bread and Mexican coffee drifted from the kitchen, and where an argument was slowly building between a young woman and her mother. León, Guanajuato. April 13th, 1979, 6:47 p.m. The sun was sinking behind the colonial buildings, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood red. The city was sinking into an eerie silence, not the ordinary quiet of a holiday afternoon. This was the silence of a place holding its breath. Shops had closed earlier than usual, their metal shutters pulled down and padlocked with unusual haste. Curtains were drawn tight across windows, and behind these curtains candles flickered like tiny stars fallen to earth. Streets lay empty cobblestones, gleaming faintly in the dying light, as if every resident had simply vanished. Today was Viernes Santo, Good Friday, the day when, according to Catholic tradition, all of Mexico should remain indoors praying, mourning, remembering the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. The day when, according to the grandmothers and their grandmothers before them, the gate between the world of the living and what lurks beneath becomes thin as morning mist. The day when shadows grow longer than they should, when mirrors show things that are not quite there, when the wind carries whispers that sound almost like words. The day when no one should go out after sunset, especially not to places filled with music, alcohol, and bodies moving to the rhythm of sin. But Lucia Esperanza Reyes had never believed in any of that. The small house on Hidalgo Street was a 2-story structure built in the colonial era with thick adobe walls that kept the interior cool even in the hottest summers. Tonight those walls seemed to trap something else entirely. The air inside was heavy with the scent of candle wax and copal incense, the smoke curling upward like prayers ascending to heaven. Elena Reyes, Lucia's mother, had lit 12 white candles around the family altar, arranging them in a precise pattern that her own mother had taught her decades ago. A wooden crucifix hung on the wall above its painted figure of Christ, gazing down with eyes that seemed to follow movement. Faded photographs of deceased relatives surrounded it, their sepia faces watching from beyond the veil. And Elena's prayers rose in a steady murmur, ancient words she had known since childhood, words that had been passed down through generations of women who understood that some things in this world required protection. Upstairs, in a bedroom decorated with medical textbooks and posters of disco stars, Lucia stood before the mirror pulling the zipper of her red dress. She was 21 years old with the kind of beauty that made people stop and stare. Her skin was the color of warm honey, smooth and unblemished. Her eyes were dark as obsidian, framed by thick lashes that needed no mascara. Her hair fell in natural curls to her shoulders, black as a moonless night, gleaming with health and youth. She had her father's strong jaw and her mother's full lips, a combination that turned heads wherever she went. But Lucia's beauty was not her defining feature. What set her apart was her mind. She was a final-year medical student at the university, top of her class, the pride of her professors. While other students struggled with anatomy and pharmacology, Lucia devoured the material with an almost hungry intensity. She wanted to be a doctor, not just any doctor, but a surgeon. She wanted to hold a scalpel in her hand and cut through flesh and bone to reach inside the human body and fix what was broken. She believed in science and evidence in the tangible and measurable world. She believed that every problem had a solution, every mystery an explanation, every shadow a source of light that would reveal its mundane origins. She did not believe in ghosts, did not believe in curses, did not believe in devils that walked among men or demons that could be summoned on holy nights. She was the kind of person who would look at a ghost story and ask for evidence for video footage for a logical explanation. The supernatural to Lucia was simply the natural that had not yet been understood. Tonight she would prove her mother wrong. The dress hugged her body perfectly, the fabric smooth against her skin. It was the color of fresh blood of roses in full bloom of danger and passion and life. The hem fell just above her knees, flaring out in a way that would spin beautifully on a dance floor. The neckline was modest enough for a church, but daring enough for a nightclub, showing just a hint of collarbone. She had bought this dress 3 weeks ago, saving her money from tutoring sessions and part-time work at the university clinic. She had been waiting for the perfect occasion to wear it. Tonight was that occasion. The silver heels were next. She had saved 2 months of wages to afford them, eating cheap meals and skipping coffee runs, but they were worth every centavo. The heels added 3 inches to her height and made her legs look impossibly long. When she walked, they made a satisfying click, click, click against the floor, announcing her presence like a drum roll before a grand entrance. She applied her makeup with practiced precision. Red lipstick the same shade as her dress, smoky eyeshadow that made her dark eyes seem even more mysterious, a touch of blush on her cheekbones, a spritz of perfume, something floral and expensive that her aunt had given her for her birthday. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. "Perfect," she whispered. Tonight would be perfect. She was certain of it. The doorway darkened. Elena stood there, her silhouette framed against the candlelight flickering from downstairs. She was 53 years old, but she looked older, worn down by years of work and worry. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Her hands, roughened from decades of cooking and cleaning and caring for others, clutched a rosary so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. She wore a simple black dress, the kind she always wore on holy days, and her feet were bare on the wooden floor. Her face was pale, almost ghostly in the dim light. And her eyes, those dark eyes that Lucia had inherited, were filled with something that looked very much like fear. "Lucia." Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of generations. "Where are you going?" Lucia did not turn around. She continued looking at herself in the mirror, adjusting a curl that had fallen out of place. "Mr. Green, Mama, with Mariana and the girls, I already told you." "Tonight," Elena's voice cracked. "Today is Viernes Santo, the day our Lord suffered and died on the cross for our sins, the day we should spend in prayer and contemplation." "And you want to go dancing in a nightclub, drinking alcohol, surrounded by strangers and sin—" Lucia finally turned, meeting her mother's eyes with the patient weariness of someone who had heard this lecture 100 times before. "Mama, I do not believe in those things. You know that. I have explained it to you 1,000 times. This is not about what you believe, Mia. Elena crossed the room with surprising speed, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She took her daughter's hands in her own. Her fingers were ice-cold and trembling. I have lived long enough to know there are things in this world, things that do not care whether you believe in them or not. They exist anyway, and they can still reach you. They can still touch you. They can still take you. There are doors that should never be opened. There are nights that should never be tested. And there are warnings that should never be ignored. But the young rarely listen until it is too late. Lucia sighed, trying to keep her frustration in check. She loved her mother, she truly did. Elena had raised her alone after her father died in a factory accident when Lucia was 12. Elena had worked double shifts at the textile mill to pay for Lucia's education. Elena had sacrificed everything so that her daughter could have a better life. But Elena was also a product of her generation, steeped in superstition and old wives' tales. She believed in the evil eye and protective amulets. She consulted curanderas for minor ailments instead of doctors. She saw omens in the flight of birds and warnings in the patterns of clouds. She was in Lucia's mind a relic of a bygone era, clinging to beliefs that had no place in the modern world. "Mama, this is 1979, not the Middle Ages. I am a medical student. I study the human body, the mechanisms of disease, the chemistry of life. I believe in science, in evidence, in things that can be proven and measured and understood. I do not believe in ghosts or demons or curses." "You think science can explain everything?" Elena's eyes were wet with unshed tears. "You think what you cannot see, what you cannot touch or measure with your machines does not exist. You think the universe reveals all its secrets to those who ask nicely. I think if demons were real, hospitals would have a department for them. We would have demonologists instead of neurologists. We would have exorcism wards instead of psychiatric units." Elena shook her head slowly, a sad smile crossing her weathered face. "So young, so confident, so sure that you understand how the world works." She squeezed her daughter's hands tighter. "When I was your age, I thought the same way. I thought my mother's warnings were the ravings of an old woman who had spent too much time in church. I thought I knew better. I thought I was too smart to be touched by the darkness. What happened to change your mind?" Elena's face went pale. Paler than before. She released Lucia's hands and stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. "That is not a story for tonight, Mija. That is not a story I tell anyone." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, I am begging you, just tonight, stay home with me. We will pray together. We will light candles and ask for protection. Tomorrow, when the sun rises and the danger is past, you can go anywhere you want. I will even give you money for a nice dress. But tonight of all nights, do not go out." Lucia looked at her mother. She saw the wrinkles carved into her face by years of sun and worry. She saw the gray threads woven through her black hair growing more numerous with each passing year. She saw the eyes red and raw from crying, from fear, from something that Lucia did not understand and was not sure she wanted to understand. For a moment, just a moment, she almost relented. The desperation in her mother's voice was real. The fear in her eyes was genuine. Whatever Elena believed, whatever she had experienced in her past, she truly thought that Lucia was in danger. But then Lucia thought about Mariana waiting for her, about Sophia and Gabby, and the dresses they had been planning for weeks, about the new DJ at Mr. Green who everyone said was incredible, about the lights and the music and the feeling of freedom that came from dancing until your feet hurt and your heart was pounding and you felt more alive than at any other moment. She thought about being 21 years old on the verge of becoming a doctor with her whole life ahead of her. She thought about all the Viernes Santos she had spent locked in this house praying rosaries and lighting candles for dangers that never materialized. And she made her choice. "I am sorry, Mama, but I already promised the girls. They are counting on me." The phone rang downstairs, its shrill bell cutting through the heavy silence. "That is Mariana. I have to go." Lucia bent down and kissed her mother's forehead, feeling the cold, dry skin against her lips. "I will be careful, I promise. I will be home before dawn." She grabbed her purse, a small silver clutch that matched her shoes, and walked past her mother toward the door, toward the stairs, toward a night that would change everything. Elena stood alone in the bedroom, listening to her daughter's heels clicking down the stairs, listening to the front door open and close, listening to the sound of a car horn outside, listening to the silence that followed. She did not understand why, but she knew. She knew with a certainty that went beyond logic or reason, that settled into her bones like a winter chill that would never thaw. She would never see her daughter return the way she hoped. And so Elena did the only thing she could do. She fell to her knees. And she prayed. The yellow Volkswagen Beetle rolled through the empty streets of León at 9:15 p.m. Mariana del Valle was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other conducting an invisible orchestra, as Donna Summer's Hot Stuff blared from the cassette player. Her blonde hair, dyed that color from its natural brown, was teased into feathered waves that bounced with every movement. She was 22, a year older than Lucia, and worked as a receptionist at a law firm downtown. She was the unofficial leader of their little group, the one who made plans and organized outings and always knew where the best parties were happening. Sofia Contreras sat in the passenger seat, carefully applying another layer of lip gloss while watching herself in the visor mirror. She was 20, the youngest of the group, still living with her parents and studying to be a teacher. She was quieter than the others, more thoughtful, with a tendency to see shadows where others saw light. Her grandmother had been a curandera, a folk healer, and some of that sensitivity seemed to have passed down through the blood. Gabriela Mendoza Gabby, to her friends, sat in the back seat next to Lucia. She was 21, a business student with a wild streak and a laugh that could fill any room. She was the most beautiful of the group, objectively speaking, with high cheekbones and full lips and a body that turned heads wherever she went. She was also the most reckless, the one who said yes to everything, who never met a dare she would not take, or a line she would not cross. 4 girls in a yellow car driving through streets that seemed to have been abandoned by the living. "Can you believe this?" Mariana gestured at the empty sidewalks. "It is like everyone just disappeared." "It is Viernes Santo," Sofia said quietly. "People stay home. They pray." "People are boring," Gabby countered. "That is why we are going to be the only ones at Mr. Green tonight." "We will have the whole dance floor to ourselves." "Actually, I heard it is going to be packed," Mariana said. "Everyone who is young and fun is going to be there. It is only the old people and the scared ones who are hiding at home." Lucia sat in the back seat, gazing out the window, watching the city pass by. The buildings of León were a mix of old and new colonial architecture, standing alongside modern construction churches with centuries of history next door to shops selling the latest fashions. Normally on a Friday night, these streets would be alive with activity, couples walking hand in hand, groups of young people heading to parties, vendors selling tacos and elotes from their carts, music spilling out from bars and restaurants. But tonight the streets were deserted. Streetlights flickered with an irregular rhythm, casting pools of orange light that seemed somehow insufficient against the darkness. Storefronts were shuttered and dark. Even the stray dogs that usually roamed the streets were nowhere to be seen. It was as if the entire city had decided to hide from something. "Hey," Sofia said from the front seat, her voice dropping to a more serious tone. "My mother told me something before I left tonight." "What?" Mariana asked, not taking her eyes off the road. "When she was young, around our age, she had a friend who went out on Viernes Santo, against her parents' wishes, just like us. She went to a dance hall, one of those places that used to exist before the discos. And she met a man there, a stranger, beautiful beyond words, my mother said. the kind of beautiful that does not look quite real. The car fell silent except for the music. Even Donna Summer seemed to quiet down as if listening. They danced together all night. My mother's friend said it was the best night of her life. She had never felt so alive, so desired, so special. The stranger held her close and whispered things in her ear, beautiful things, promises of love and forever. "Sounds romantic," Gabby said, but her voice lacked its usual flippancy. But then at midnight she looked down, at his feet. Sophia paused, and she saw. She did not finish the sentence. "What?" Lucia found herself asking despite herself. What did she see? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, then she shook her head. "My mother never told me. She said her friend would not say, that her friend went pale every time someone asked and refused to speak of it, that her friend entered a convent a week later and never came out. She died there 30 years later without ever telling anyone what she saw beneath those perfect trousers." Silence filled the car. Then Mariana burst out laughing, breaking the spell. "Enough with the scary stories. We are going to have fun tonight, not terrify ourselves with old wives' tales." She turned up the volume on the cassette player. "This is 1979, not the Dark Ages. We are modern women, university, educated with our whole lives ahead of us. We do not believe in ghost stories and demons and boogeyman. We believe in disco music and margaritas and having the time of our lives." Gabby giggled and started singing along to the music. Sophia shrugged and returned to her lip gloss. The tension in the car dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Only Lucia remained silent, Sophia's unfinished story echoing in her mind. When she looked down at his feet, what did she see? She shook her head. It did not matter. It was just another old tale meant to scare children into obedience. Another piece of superstition designed to keep people locked in their homes praying to gods that did not answer. She was a woman of science, a medical student. She would not be frightened by stories. Tonight she would prove there was nothing to fear. But as the car drove deeper into the empty city, Lucia could not shake the feeling that something was watching her. Something in the shadows between streetlights, something that had been waiting for this night. For her. Plaza Insurgentes appeared before them like an island of light in a sea of darkness. The square was alive with neon colors, a stark contrast to the dead streets they had just driven through. Cars lined the parking areas, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. People milled about on the sidewalks, young people in fashionable clothes, laughing and talking and pointing at the building that dominated the center of the plaza. Mr. Green. The nightclub rose 2 stories high, its facade painted a glossy black that reflected the lights like a dark mirror. Above the entrance, a massive neon sign spelled out the name in letters that cycled through every color of the rainbow, each one blazing for a moment before fading into the next. Red to orange to yellow to green to blue to purple and back again, an endless loop of artificial rainbow. The bass from inside was so powerful that Lucia could feel it through the car's floor, a rhythmic thumping that seemed to sync with her heartbeat. A line of people stretched from the entrance down the block, all of them young, all of them beautiful, all of them eager to get inside. Mierda, Mariana said, pulling into a parking spot. "Look at that line. We will be waiting for an hour." "I know the bouncer," Gabby said with a wink. "Leave it to me." What none of them knew, what no one in that line knew, was the history of the ground beneath their feet. Before it became Mr. Green, this building had been a warehouse storing cotton and tobacco and other goods that moved through León's markets. The warehouse had been built in 1952, a simple structure of concrete and steel. But before the warehouse there had been something else. In the 19th century, this plot of land had been part of the old cemetery. The Campo Santo de Los Angeles, it was called. The Holy Field of the Angels. For over 100 years, the dead of León had been buried here, their bodies laid to rest in the dark earth, their souls commended to God. Then in 1923, the city had decided to expand. The cemetery was declared too valuable for the dead, its land needed for the living. The graves were dug up, the remains relocated to a new cemetery on the outskirts of town, most of them anyway. When Plaza Insurgentes was constructed in the 1960s, workers digging the foundations had discovered bones, lots of bones, skulls and femurs and rib cages, the remains of those who had been buried in unmarked graves, whose families had long since forgotten them, whose names had been lost to time. The construction company, eager to stay on schedule, had quietly disposed of the bones and continued building. Beneath the dance floor of Mr. Green, beneath the flashing lights and pounding music and dancing feet, unmarked graves still remained. Unsettled souls that had never been laid to rest properly. Spirits that had never found peace. And perhaps something else. Something older than the cemetery. Something that had been here before the Spanish came, before the Aztecs built their temples, before humans first walked this land. Something that had been waiting. But Lucia knew none of this. She only saw the neon lights, heard the disco music, felt the excitement bubbling in her chest. She only thought about dancing and drinking and having fun with her friends. She stepped out of the car, her silver heels clicking against the pavement, her red dress catching the light like a flame. Gabby was already working her magic on the bouncer, a large man in a black t-shirt who looked like he had never smiled in his life. Whatever she said to him, whispered in his ear, while her hand rested on his arm, it worked. He nodded, once unhooked the velvet rope, and gestured for the four girls to enter. They walked past the line of waiting people, past the envious stares and muttered complaints toward the black doors of Mr. Green. Lucia paused at the threshold. She turned and looked back down the street toward the darkness beyond the plaza's lights. Nothing. Only shadows. But she could have sworn for just a moment that she felt something watching her, an invisible gaze, heavy and cold, pressing against her skin like phantom fingers. It is just nerves, she told herself. Just Mama's stories getting to me. "Lucia, are you coming?" Mariana called from inside. Lucia took a deep breath, pushed the feeling aside, and walked through the doors. The neon light washed over her face, painting her skin in shades of red and green and blue, like she was stepping into fire, like she was being consumed. She did not know it was an omen. The doors closed behind her. And somewhere in the back of the club, in a small room filled with monitors and recording equipment, a security camera recorded her entrance. The clock on the wall of that room, a simple analog clock that had been working perfectly for 3 years, suddenly stopped. 9:17 p.m. It would never run again. Inside Mr. Green was a universe completely separated from the world outside. If the streets of León had been wrapped in the sacred silence of Viernes Santo, all closed doors and flickering candles and whispered prayers, then this place was the opposite of all that. This was noise and light and heat and motion. This was life cranked up to its maximum volume sensation, amplified beyond anything the normal world could offer. The strobe lights sliced through darkness in violent bursts, turning every movement into disconnected frames like watching a film that was missing half its images. The effect was disorienting, almost hypnotic, making it impossible to focus on any one thing for more than a moment. Neon tubes in red and blue and purple lined the walls and ceiling, casting everything in artificial colors that made skin look alien and eyes look like gemstones. Artificial fog drifted through the air at chest height, pumped from machines hidden in the corners, creating an effect that was almost underwater, almost otherworldly. The dance floor was the centerpiece of the club, and it was unlike anything Lucia had ever seen. It was made of thick glass panels, at least a dozen of them arranged in a grid, and beneath the glass was a network of LED lights that shifted through endless colors. When you stood on that floor, you seemed to be standing over an abyss, a bottomless pit filled with swirling light. The effect was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, like dancing on the surface of a star. The bass hit Lucia's chest like a physical blow, like a giant's fist tapping against her rib cage. She could feel it in her teeth, in her bones, in the vibration of the air against her skin. Gloria Gaynor was singing about survival through speakers the size of refrigerators, her voice filling every corner of the space, and everywhere Lucia looked, people were singing along their mouths, moving in unison, 100 voices joining into one. The smell hit her next. Cigarette smoke, thick and blue-gray, drifting in lazy spirals toward the ceiling. Expensive perfume and cheap cologne mixing together into something that was neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just overwhelming. The raw animal scent of hundreds of bodies pressed together, moving together, breathing together, sweating together. And underneath all of that, something else. Something metallic and sharp, like the smell of a lightning strike, like the ozone that fills the air after a storm. It was, in short, exactly what Lucia had been looking for. "This is amazing!" Mariana shouted over the music, her face split by a grin so wide it looked almost painful. "Come on, let us get drinks." She grabbed Lucia's hand and pulled her into the crowd. They pushed through the sea of bodies, past waving arms and spinning couples, past groups of young men who turned to watch them pass, their eyes following the curves of their dresses. The heat was intense, a combination of body warmth and inadequate air conditioning, and the sheer energy of hundreds of people all moving at once. They found a small table near the bar, a minor miracle on a night this crowded. The table was tiny, barely big enough for 4 drinks, but it was theirs. Gabby and Sophia appeared a moment later, having somehow gotten separated in the crowd. Mariana flagged down a waitress and ordered 4 margaritas. "The biggest ones you have, and keep them coming." When the drinks arrived, they were served in glasses the size of fish bowls, the rims crusted with salt, the pale green liquid glistening with ice. The girls raised their glasses in a toast. "To friendship," Mariana shouted. "To youth," Gabby added. "To crazy nights we will never forget," Sophia grinned. Lucia looked at her 3 friends, these girls who had been with her since high school, who had seen her through exams and heartbreaks and 1,000 small crises. She felt a surge of affection for them, these beautiful, vibrant, ridiculous people who made her life so much brighter. "To us," she said, "to right now, to this moment." They clinked their glasses together and Lucia drank. The lime and salt and tequila burned down her throat, warming her from the inside out. The tension in her shoulders began to unknot. The worry her mother had planted in her mind began to fade, replaced by the glow of alcohol and the pulse of the music, and the simple joy of being young and alive. Maybe she had been worrying too much. Maybe this would just be a normal night, a fun night, a night filled with dancing and laughing and memories that would last forever. Maybe. An hour passed, then another. The 4 girls danced and drank and laughed until their stomachs hurt. The DJ was incredible, just as everyone had said, mixing songs together in ways that kept the energy flowing, never letting the crowd stop moving. Donna Summer gave way to Gloria Gaynor, gave way to the Bee Gees, gave way to Chic, an endless stream of disco perfection. Gabby had spotted Carlos, a law student she had been flirting with for weeks, and was now pressed against him in a corner of the dance floor, their bodies moving together in a way that left little to the imagination. Sophia had met a tall stranger with kind eyes and was dancing with him, more reserved than Gabby, but clearly enjoying herself. Even Mariana had found a dance partner, a handsome young man in a white suit who moved like he had been born on a dance floor. Lucia was alone at the table, sipping her 3rd margarita, watching her friends with a smile. She was happy for them, truly, but she was also content to sit for a moment, to rest her feet, to observe the chaos around her from a place of relative calm. And that was when she noticed that something was wrong. She could not pinpoint exactly what. It was not any one thing, but a collection of small details that added up to a feeling, a sensation, a whisper of wrongness that tickled the back of her mind. The strobe light seemed to be flickering slower than before, the gaps between flashes longer, as if time itself was being stretched. The music, still disco, still upbeat, seemed to have strange notes bleeding through low and mournful sounds that did not belong, like a funeral dirge being played backward beneath the bright melodies. and there was a feeling, a sensation that she could not explain. Since she had walked into Mr. Green, Lucia had felt eyes on her, not the admiring glances of men who appreciated a beautiful woman which she was used to and could easily ignore. This was different. This was heavier, more penetrating, like someone was not just looking at her, but looking into her, reading her thoughts, measuring her soul. She turned, trying to find the source of that gaze. Nothing. Just the dancing crowd, the swirling lights, the drifting fog, just her imagination, just the tequila playing tricks, just the stories her mother had filled her head with. Mariana appeared at the table, face flushed with dancing and drinking, grin wide. "You okay? You look tense." "I am fine." Lucia forced a smile. "Just a little tired." Tired at 11 o'clock. No way. Mariana grabbed her hand. "Come on, dance with me. The DJ is about to play my favorite song." Lucia allowed herself to be pulled onto the dance floor. The glass panels glowed beneath her feet, shifting from blue to green to purple, and she felt as if she was walking on light itself. She started to move, letting the music guide her body, and for a few minutes everything was fine. The alcohol warmed her blood. The beat vibrated through her bones. She closed her eyes and let go, surrendering to the rhythm. Then the lights went out. Not gradually, not a flicker or a fade. One moment the club was ablaze with neon and strobes, and the next moment there was nothing. Complete darkness so absolute that Lucia could not see her hand in front of her face. Someone screamed a short, sharp sound of surprise. Lucia heard glasses breaking somewhere, heard bodies bumping into each other, heard the confused murmur of hundreds of people suddenly blind. And then in that darkness she felt something. A hand touched the back of her neck. It was cold, ice cold. The fingers were long and slender, and they slid down from her nape to her shoulder with a slow, deliberate motion, like a lover's caress. But there was nothing loving about this touch. It was wrong. It was invasive. It was a violation that went beyond the physical, as if those fingers were reaching through her skin to touch something deeper. Then the lights came back. Lucia spun around, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. No one was standing behind her. No one was close enough to have touched her. The nearest person was Mariana, several feet away, looking concerned. But Lucia could still feel the residue of that touch, the cold lingering on her skin like a brand, the sensation of fingers that should not exist tracing patterns on her flesh. "Are you okay?" Mariana appeared at her side, face worried. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Someone touched my neck." Lucia's voice was shaking. She hated that it was shaking. "Someone was right behind me." "What, who?" Lucia looked around the crowd. Everyone was dancing again, as if the blackout had never happened. No one seemed disturbed. No one seemed to have noticed anything unusual. I do not know. Maybe I imagined it. But she knew she had not imagined it. She knew with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond everything she thought she understood about the world. Whatever had touched her was not human. Lucia needed to get away from the dance floor, needed to find somewhere quiet to think, to process, to convince herself that she was not losing her mind. She pushed through the crowd toward the restrooms, which were located at the end of a long hallway, away from the main space. The noise faded with each step, the pounding bass becoming a distant thrum, the shouting voices becoming a muffled murmur. The women's restroom was empty. It was a small space, 3 porcelain sinks beneath a mirror that stretched the length of the wall, 3 stalls with doors that did not quite close properly. The floor was black and white checkered tile like a chessboard, like something from Alice in Wonderland. The lighting was fluorescent, harsh and unforgiving after the soft neon glow of the main room. Lucia walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. Cold water flowed over her fingers, and she cupped her hands, splashing it onto her face, feeling the chill spread across her skin. "Calm down," she told herself. "You are being ridiculous. There is a perfectly logical explanation for everything. The cold touch was just someone's drink spilling. The blackout was just an electrical problem. There is nothing supernatural happening here." She looked up at the mirror and froze. The reflection looking back at her was her own. The same face, the same hair, the same red dress. But the expression was different. Lucia was smiling faintly, trying to calm herself down, but the image in the mirror was not smiling. It was staring at her with an expression that was sad, mournful, full of a terrible knowledge, as if it knew something she did not, as if it was mourning something that had not yet happened. Lucia blinked. The reflection blinked too, and now it was smiling, exactly like her, just an illusion, a trick of the fluorescent lights, the alcohol playing with her perception. She bent down, washed her hands again, taking deep breaths, trying to steady her racing heart. When she looked back up at the mirror, there was a figure standing behind her, tall, thin, dressed in black. The face was shadowed, but the eyes were visible. They were green. A brilliant, blazing green like two emeralds lit from within like the eyes of some jungle predator catching the light. Lucia whipped around so fast she almost fell. The restroom was empty. Just her. Just the sinks. Just the checkered floor. She was alone. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were shaking. Her breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. There is nothing there, she told herself. There was never anything there. You are drunk and tired and letting your imagination run wild. But she did not believe herself. She walked quickly out of the restroom back toward the noise and light and safety of the crowd. She did not notice that her wristwatch, the silver watch her father had given her for her birthday before he died, had stopped. Frozen at 9:17 p.m., the exact time she had entered Mr. Green, she did not notice that the door of the restroom, which she had left standing open, slowly swung closed behind her, as if pushed by an invisible hand. When Lucia returned to the table, she noticed something was wrong with her purse. She had left it on the chair, a small silver clutch that matched her shoes. It was exactly where she had placed it, but it was open. She had closed it before leaving. She was certain of that. She always closed her purse. With trembling hands, she picked it up and looked inside. There was something there that had not been there before. A flower. A dead flower. The petals were black and withered, curled in on themselves like the fingers of a corpse. The stem was broken, dangling at an unnatural angle. The leaves, what was left of them, were brittle and dry. And the smell, God, the smell! It hit her like a physical blow, rot, decay. The smell of something long dead, the smell of damp earth and open graves, the smell of a cemetery at midnight. Lucia dropped the purse, stepped back, felt her gorge rise. What is wrong? Mariana was suddenly there, picking up the purse, looking inside. What is this? Where did this come from? I do not know. Lucia's voice was barely a whisper. I did not put it there. It was not there before. Maybe someone mixed up bags, or maybe it is a prank. Maybe. But she knew it was not a mix-up, and she knew it was not a prank. Her purse had a zipper. She had closed it securely before going to the restroom. No one could have put anything inside without opening the zipper, and no human hand had put this flower in her bag. This was a message, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. She should leave. Every instinct, every fiber of her being was screaming at her to get out of this place, to run to the car, to drive home as fast as possible, and never look back. But then she saw him, and everything else ceased to matter. He was standing at the corner of the bar alone. The first thing Lucia noticed was his stillness. In a room full of movement, full of dancing bodies and gesturing hands and nodding heads, he was absolutely motionless. He stood like a statue, like a photograph, like something carved from stone and placed there as a decoration. Not a muscle moved, not an eyelash flickered. He was staring directly at her. The second thing she noticed was his beauty. Lucia had seen handsome men before. Her ex-boyfriend had been handsome. Some of the young doctors at the hospital were handsome. But this was something else entirely. This was not handsome. This was beautiful in a way that human beings are not supposed to be beautiful. His face was perfect. Not attractive, not good-looking, but perfect, as if someone had taken a ruler and compass and designed every angle, every proportion to mathematical precision. His cheekbones were high and sharp. His jaw was strong and clean. His lips were full but not feminine, curved in a slight smile that suggested secrets and promises. His skin was pale, almost white, but it did not look sickly. It seemed to glow faintly, as if light was shining from somewhere beneath the surface. His hair was black, blacker than her own, slicked back from his forehead, in a style that might have looked old-fashioned on anyone else, but looked timeless on him. And his eyes. His eyes were green, but not any green that Lucia had ever seen. They were the green of emeralds, of deep jungle pools, of summer leaves in perfect sunlight. They were so vivid, so intense, that they seemed to glow in the dim light of the club. Looking at them was like looking into two tiny suns. He was beautiful. He was wrong. He was not human. Some part of Lucia knew this. Some ancient, primal part of her brain, the part that had kept her ancestors alive when predators stalked the savannah, was screaming at her to run. This is not natural, that part of her said. This is not real. This is something wearing a human shape like a costume. But she did not run. He smiled at her, a slow smile full of meaning, full of promise. And despite everything, despite all the warnings and all the signs and all the screaming instincts, Lucia smiled back. He extended his hand, palm up, fingers spread, an invitation. She knew she should not accept. She knew something terrible would happen if she took that hand. She knew with the same certainty that she knew her own name, that this moment was the last chance to turn away, to make a different choice, to save herself. But she placed her hand in his anyway. His skin was cold, so cold that it burned like touching ice. His fingers closed around hers, and she could not have pulled away if she wanted to. The music changed, the lights shifted, and Lucia began to dance. They moved together across the glass floor, and Lucia's world transformed. She no longer heard the disco music that had been playing all night. Instead, she heard something else, a different melody, slower, more mournful, like a violin playing alone in an empty cathedral at midnight. A funeral song, a dirge for the dying. She no longer saw the crowd around her. The hundreds of people who had been dancing, drinking, laughing, they were gone, faded away like fog in sunlight. The only reality was him, his face. His eyes, his smile. It was as if they were dancing in a separate dimension, a pocket of space and time that existed only for them. The rest of the world was a distant dream, irrelevant, forgotten. He pulled her closer. His arms encircled her waist, and she could feel the cold radiating from him, seeping through her dress, chilling her skin. His face was inches from hers, and she could see every detail of his impossible beauty. Up close, it was even more unnerving. There were no imperfections, no pores, no blemishes, no tiny asymmetries that make human faces human. He was like a painting come to life. His lips brushed against her ear. "Finally," he whispered. His voice was like nothing she had ever heard, deep, resonant. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, from inside her head, from the floor beneath her feet, from the air itself. It was the voice of a cave, the voice of a well, the voice of something speaking from a very great depth. "You came. I have been waiting for you for so very long." Lucia tried to speak, but her throat felt constricted, as if invisible fingers were wrapped around it. "Who are you?" she managed to croak. He did not answer. He just smiled that slow, knowing smile and pulled her even closer. "Do not look down," he said. His voice had changed. It was harder now, colder, an edge of steel beneath the velvet. "What?" "Do not look down, no matter what happens, no matter what you feel. Do not look down." It was not a request, it was a command, a warning, a threat wrapped in silk. A shiver ran through Lucia's body, starting at her scalp and running all the way down to her toes. Her legs felt weak, her head felt light. Why should she not look down? What was he hiding? The question burned in her mind like a hot coal. It whispered to her, it screamed at her, it demanded an answer. Lucia was a medical student. She believed in evidence in facts and seeing things with her own eyes. She did not believe in warnings from strangers. She did not obey commands from men she did not know. If he did not want her to look down, then she needed to look down. She needed to know. Slowly, as if her head was being pushed by an invisible force, Lucia tilted her chin downward. Her eyes traveled down his chest, over his belt, past his hips, and stopped. Beneath the hem of his perfectly tailored black trousers there were no shoes. There were no feet. Instead, there were two hooves. They were black as polished obsidian black as the void between stars. They gleamed under the lights of the dance floor, reflecting colors catching the glow. Each hoof was about the size of a child's fist, split down the middle like the hooves of a goat. And above them, where ankles should have been, was a layer of coarse black fur, thick and matted. The hooves tapped against the glass floor. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was quiet, almost gentle, but it cut through everything. Through the music that was no longer playing, through the silence that had swallowed the world, through Lucia's own heartbeat, which seemed to have stopped entirely. She could not move, could not breathe, could not think. Her blood turned to ice in her veins. Every hair on her body stood up. Her stomach churned with a nausea so powerful she thought she might vomit right there on the dance floor. Then slowly, with the terrible inevitability of a nightmare, she raised her eyes to look at his face. It was changing. The beautiful mask was melting away, revealing something beneath. His skin was darkening, shifting from pale white to a sickly gray. Black veins rose to the surface, pulsing visibly like worms crawling beneath his flesh. His lips pulled back, revealing teeth that were no longer human. They were sharp-pointed, row after row of them, like the teeth of a shark. And his eyes, the green was gone. In its place was red, blood red, fire red. The red of embers in a dying flame, the red of the sunset before a storm, the red of hell itself. In those eyes, Lucia saw things. She saw flames reaching up from an endless abyss. She saw souls writhing in torment, their mouths open in eternal screams. She saw darkness so complete that light had never touched it, would never touch it. She saw eternity, and eternity was pain. She saw hell. The thing that had been beautiful smiled, and its smile was the worst thing of all. It was a smile of triumph, of possession, of victory. Too late, it said, and its voice was no longer the voice of one being. It was a chorus, a legion, 1,000 voices speaking at once, overlapping, echoing, filling the world. You danced with me, you touched me, you belong to me now, there is no escape. Not in this life, not in the next, Lucia screamed. The sound that came from her throat was not human. It was a primal howl, the cry of an animal caught in a trap, the shriek of a soul being torn from its moorings. It ripped through the air, through the walls, through the fabric of reality itself. And then the creature released her. Its hands opened, and Lucia fell. The glass floor rushed up to meet her. Her knees hit first a burst of pain that barely registered. Then her palms, her elbows, her whole body. She lay on the glowing panels, curled into a fetal position, shaking so violently that her teeth chattered. Above her the lights flickered. The music resumed as if it had never stopped. People began dancing again as if nothing had happened. And somewhere in the chaos that followed, Mariana was screaming her name. But Lucia could not hear her. She could only hear the echo of hooves on glass. Tap, 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 fading into the darkness. And then, mercifully, nothing at all. Mariana found her on the floor. Lucia was curled into a ball, her beautiful red dress crumpled and stained, her black hair spread across the glass like a pool of ink. Her eyes were open wide and staring, but they saw nothing. Her skin was white, so white it was almost translucent, like the skin of something that had never seen the sun. Her lips were blue, the color of a corpse. And when Mariana touched her, she recoiled. Lucia was cold, not normal cold, not the cold of someone who'd been standing near an air conditioner. This was the cold of ice, of frozen metal, of death. Lucia! Mariana shook her, slapped her cheek, screamed her name over and over. Can you hear me, Lucia? No response. just those wide, staring eyes looking at something that was not there. The bouncers came, then the paramedics, then what felt like hours later the ambulance. Mariana rode with her to the hospital, holding her hand the entire way, feeling the cold seep into her own flesh like a curse. And she did not tell anyone what she had seen. In that moment on the dance floor, when the strobe lights flickered at just the right angle, Mariana had seen him too. The man dancing with Lucia. The beautiful man with the green eyes. She had seen him for just an instant, a flash, a heartbeat. But she had seen him, and he had seen her. He had looked directly at her over Lucia's shoulder, and he had smiled. Not a warm smile, not a friendly smile, a promise. The smile that said, "You are next." Hospital General de León, April 14, 1979, 12:47 a.m. The emergency room was chaos. Doctors shouting, nurses running, machines beeping, and at the center of it all, Lucia lay motionless on a gurney, her red dress a splash of color against the sterile white sheets. They could not figure out what was wrong with her. All her tests came back normal. No drugs in her system, no alcohol beyond what she had consumed at the club, not nearly enough to cause this reaction. No signs of stroke or heart attack or brain damage. Her vital signs were stable if slightly depressed. Her brain activity was normal, but her body temperature was falling. 36 degrees Celsius when she arrived, then 35, then 34. "This is impossible," the lead doctor muttered, staring at the thermometer as if it was lying to him. At this temperature, she should be experiencing severe hypothermia. Her organs should be shutting down. But her heart rate is steady. Her blood pressure is fine. It is like her body is operating by different rules. They wrapped her in heated blankets. They pumped warm fluids into her veins. Nothing worked. The cold persisted, radiating from her skin like a dark star, chilling everything it touched. Elena arrived at 2:14 a.m., wild-eyed and weeping, clutching her rosary like a lifeline. Antonio was behind her, silent and stone-faced the way he always was in times of crisis. "What happened to my daughter?" Elena demanded. "What did you do to her?" The doctors had no answers, and when Mariana finally told them about the man, about the dance, about the scream and the collapse, Elena's face went the color of old bone. "El Diablo," she whispered. "My daughter danced with El Diablo." No one believed her, of course. The doctors exchanged glances. The nurses looked away. Even Antonio shook his head, too practical a man to accept such an explanation. But Mariana believed her, because Mariana had seen those green eyes, and she would see them again in her nightmares for the rest of her life. The first day passed in a blur of tests and consultations and prayers. Lucia remained unconscious, trapped in a coma that no doctor could explain. Her temperature continued to drop degree by degree as if something was slowly draining the warmth from her body. The specialists from Mexico City arrived, examined her, and left shaking their heads. There was no medical explanation for her condition. But there were other explanations. On the evening of the second day, a nurse discovered something that made her scream. Lucia was lying on her side, and her hospital gown had shifted, exposing her back. There were marks there, red marks like burns running from her shoulder blades to her waist, 5 parallel lines evenly spaced, like the marks of fingers, like a handprint. But the fingers were too long, too thin, and they ended in points sharp as claws. No one knew how the marks had appeared. No one had touched Lucia. The security cameras showed nothing unusual, but everyone who saw them knew what they meant. Something had marked her, claimed her, branded her as its own. On the third day, Lucia began to speak, not in Spanish, not in any language anyone could recognize. The sounds that came from her mouth were guttural, harsh, inhuman, like an animal trying to form words, like something speaking through a mouth it did not quite know how to use. Sometimes she laughed. A cold laugh, empty and cruel. Sometimes she cried, but there were no tears. And sometimes she spoke in Spanish, clear and coherent. "He is counting the hours. The door is almost open. I can hear them screaming. all of them, forever. The nurses refused to enter her room alone. The doctors began crossing themselves before examining her. Even the most skeptical among them could feel that something was wrong with room 317, something that went beyond medicine. Elena insisted on bringing a priest. Father Miguel arrived at 6:00 p.m. on the third day, an old man with kind eyes and trembling hands. He had performed exorcisms before 3 in his long career. He thought he knew what to expect. He was wrong. The moment he entered the room, the temperature plummeted. His breath came out in white clouds. The lights flickered and buzzed, and Lucia opened her eyes. They were red. "You think you can save her?" The voice that came from Lucia's mouth was not hers. It was deep layered like many voices speaking at once. "You think your prayers have power here?" Father Miguel raised his crucifix with shaking hands. "In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy..." Lucia sat up. The movement was wrong, unnatural. Her body rose as if pulled by invisible strings, back straight head tilted at an impossible angle. "She danced with me. She put her hand in mine. She belongs to me now." The voice laughed and the sound made the windows crack. "When the clock strikes the same hour she first looked upon my true form, she will be mine, completely, forever." Then as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Lucia collapsed back onto the bed. The red faded from her eyes. The room returned to its normal temperature. But Father Miguel did not move for a very long time. He had seen many things in his years as a priest. He had never seen anything like this. The fourth night came. 96 hours since Lucia had looked down. Since she had seen the hooves. Since she had understood what she had been dancing with. 11:47 p.m., the exact moment. The hospital was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home. The corridors were dim lit only by emergency lights. The machines beeped their steady rhythms, monitoring patients who slept and would not wake. In room 317, Lucia lay motionless. Elena sat beside her, clutching the rosary, praying without pause. She had not slept in 4 days. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. But she would not leave her daughter. She would not abandon her to the darkness. At 11:45 p.m., the monitors began to beep faster. At 11:46 p.m., Lucia's eyes snapped open. At 11:47 p.m., she sat up. The movement was the same wrong movement from before, puppet-like, inhuman. Her head tilted back, her mouth opened, and she screamed. The scream was not human. It was a chorus of voices, hundreds of them, thousands, layered on top of each other in a cacophony of agony and rage. Men and women and children all screaming at once, the sound of the damned. The lights exploded, the monitors shattered, the windows burst inward, showering the room with glass. The temperature dropped so fast that frost formed on every surface, on the walls, on the floor, on Elena's tears. Lucia's body convulsed. She clawed at her own face, drawing blood. She bit through her lip crimson, spilling down her chin. She thrashed so violently that the bed shook, the metal frame screeching against the floor. Doctors came running. Nurses screamed. Someone called a code, but no one could get close. There was a force around her, an invisible barrier that pushed back anyone who tried to approach. Elena was thrown against the wall. The doctors were sent sprawling into the corridor, and through it all the screaming continued. Then suddenly it stopped. Lucia went limp. She fell back onto the bed. The monitors flatlined, a single unbroken tone. And the room filled with the smell of sulfur, thick, choking, like rotten eggs and burning matches, and something deeper, something that smelled of fire and darkness, and endless, endless pain. Elena scrambled to her feet, ran to her daughter, grabbed her hand. Cold, so cold, still. She screamed her daughter's name, shook her, begged her to wake up. But Lucia was gone. On her forehead a symbol glowed briefly, a 5-pointed star pointing down, the mark of the devil. Then it faded, sinking into her skin, leaving no trace. And Lucia Esperanza Reyes, 21 years old, medical student, beloved daughter, lay dead. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. exactly 96 hours after she had first looked upon the true form of the thing that took her. 1 week after the funeral, the manager of Mr. Green made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His name was Roberto Cervantes, and he cared about two things: money and reputation. The story of the girl who danced with the devil was spreading through León like wildfire, and it was destroying his business. People were afraid to come to the club. Revenue was plummeting. Something had to be done. He needed to see the security footage. He gathered his head of security, Guillermo, and a sound technician named Eduardo. They met in the small control room at the back of the club, a cramped space filled with monitors and recording equipment. "Show me the footage from April 13th, Roberto said. "The camera covering the main dance floor, from 11:00 p.m. to midnight." Eduardo loaded the tape. The black and white image flickered to life on the screen. The dance floor of Mr. Green packed with people, bodies moving to music that could not be heard on the silent recording. "There," Roberto pointed. "The girl in the red dress. Focus on her." Eduardo zoomed in. Lucia appeared on the screen. She was dancing, alone. Her arms were raised, wrapped around someone who was not there. Her body moved to a rhythm that did not match the music playing in the club. She swayed slowly, intimately, as if locked in a waltz, while everyone around her danced to disco. But there was no partner, no man in black, no green eyes, just Lucia, dancing with the empty air. "That is impossible," Guillermo whispered. "I saw her with someone. Everyone saw her with someone." "Zoom in more," Roberto ordered. "Focus on the floor." Eduardo adjusted the controls. The camera zoomed in on the glass dance floor and the lights beneath it, on the shadows cast upward. And that was when they saw it. Lucia had a shadow. And next to her shadow there was another one. A second shadow with no body to cast it. Tall, thin, moving in perfect synchronization with Lucia's movements, its arms around her waist, its head bent close to her ear, and its legs. Its legs ended not in feet, but in two shapes that could only be described one way. Hooves. Roberto stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. Guillermo stumbled backward, crossing himself, muttering prayers in a voice choked with terror. Eduardo ran from the room and vomited. On the screen, the shadow with hooves continued to dance with Lucia, guiding her movements, holding her close. Then at exactly 11:47 p.m. on the timestamp, Lucia looked down. Her body went rigid, her mouth opened in a silent scream, and she collapsed. The shadow remained for a moment longer. It seemed to turn toward the camera. And even though it was just a shadow, even though it had no face, everyone who saw that footage swore they could see it smiling. Then it faded away. 2 weeks later, Mr. Green closed its doors forever. The building sat empty for decades, a dark monument to tragedy avoided by locals who crossed the street rather than walk past its boarded windows. But some things do not stay buried, some things wait. 6 months after they buried Lucia Esperanza, Reyes Mariana del Valle still could not sleep. She had moved to Guadalajara trying to escape the memories. But the memories followed her. The nightmares followed her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dance floor, the flashing lights, the man with the green eyes, and the smile that said, "You are next." On the night of October 17, 1979, exactly 6 months after Lucia's death, Mariana woke at 2:00 a.m. Something was wrong. The room was too cold, too dark, too quiet. She reached for her lamp. It would not turn on. She sat up slowly, heart-pounding eyes straining in the darkness. And then she saw it. On her nightstand, right next to the lamp that had always worked before, there was something that had not been there when she went to sleep. A flower. A dead flower. Black petals, broken stem, the smell of graves. The same flower that had appeared in Lucia's purse that night at Mr. Green. Mariana screamed. She threw herself out of bed, scrambling away from the nightstand. Her back hit the wall. When she turned to look at the mirror on her dresser, her reflection was not alone. Behind it, in the shadows of the room that existed only in the glass, a figure stood. Tall, thin, eyes burning red. She spun around, nothing. The room was empty. She looked back at the mirror. Her reflection smiled. But Mariana was not smiling. The years that followed took everything. Elena Reyes died in 1981, 2 years after her daughter. Heart attack, the doctor said. But those who knew her said she had died of a broken heart. She never recovered from Lucia's death. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped living. In the end, she simply gave up. Antonio lived another decade, a silent ghost who went to work and came home and never spoke of what had happened. He died in his sleep in 1991. Some said it was a mercy. Sofia Contreras married young and moved to Monterrey. She never spoke of that night, never returned to León. She lived a quiet life surrounded by children and grandchildren who never knew the secret she carried. She died of old age, the lucky one, the one who escaped. Gabby Mendoza disappeared in 1985. One night she went to a club with friends. The next morning she was gone. No body was ever found. No explanation was ever given. Some said she ran away. Some said something else. Those who remembered the night at Mr. Green said the thing that claimed Lucia had come back for another dance. Mariana survived. But survival is not the same as living. She moved to California in 1982, as far from León as she could get, changed her name, cut her hair, tried to become someone else, someone who had never walked into Mr. Green, never seen those green eyes, never watched her best friend die. But the memories followed her, the nightmares followed her. And sometimes in the darkness of her bedroom she could still feel eyes watching. She never married, never had children. How could she knowing what was out there? How could she love someone knowing that any night, any Viernes Santo, it might come for her too? Every year on April 13th she locked her doors, drew her curtains, turned off all the lights, and she prayed. Not to be taken, not yet, not this year. And every year when the sun rose on April 14th she exhaled. Another Viernes Santo survived. But she knew her time was running out. The smile that said, "You are next." Sooner or later, next time would come. 45 years have passed since that night in Mr. Green. The building sat empty for decades, a dark stain on Plaza Insurgents. Locals avoided it. Children dared each other to touch its walls. Stories spread, evolved, became legend. Then in 2019, developers bought the property. They tore down the old structure, built something new, modern. A nightclub for a new generation with LED lights and digital sound systems and a dance floor made of reinforced glass panels that glowed in 100 colors. They called it The Normal. The name was meant to be ironic. Some of the older residents of León did not laugh. They remembered. The Normal opened to great fanfare. Lines around the block. Influencers posting selfies. The hottest club in the region. None of the customers know what happened on this spot 45 years ago. None of them know about Lucia Esperanza Reyes, but the staff knows something is wrong. It starts small. Lights flickering at exactly 11:47 p.m. Sound systems glitching for no reason. Glasses falling off shelves when no one is nearby. The cleaning crew refuses to work alone after midnight. Cold spots, strange shadows, the feeling of being watched. And every year on Viernes Santo, the security cameras capture something impossible. A figure on the dance floor, a girl in a red dress dancing alone. Her movements slow and graceful, completely out of sync with the music. She's never there when security checks in person, only on the cameras. And if you look closely at her shadow, very closely, you can see she is not dancing alone. Someone is holding her. Someone whose shadow has hooves instead of feet. Every year after Viernes Santo, someone connected to the Normal disappears. A bartender, a DJ, a regular customer, gone without a trace. The thing that claimed Lucia is still there, still hungry, still dancing, and it will never stop. If you ever find yourself in a nightclub on a Friday night, pay attention to the people around you. Watch for the man who stands too still. Watch for eyes that seem to glow in the darkness. Watch for the smile that promises things you do not want to understand. And if a stranger asks you to dance, a stranger too beautiful to be real, whose hand is cold as ice, and whose voice seems to echo from somewhere far below, remember the story of Lucia Esperanza Reyes. Remember what happened when she said yes. Remember the hooves. Remember the red eyes. Remember the girl who danced with the devil and paid with her soul. And when that stranger extends his hand, when the music seems to slow and the lights seem to dim, and everyone else in the room seems to fade away, do the one thing Lucia could not do. Say no, turn away, run. Because once you take his hand, once you step onto that dance floor, once you begin to move to the rhythm only he can hear, there is no going back. You will dance with him forever, in this life and in whatever comes after. This story is based on events that allegedly occurred in León, Guanajuato, Mexico in 1979. Mr. Green nightclub was closed shortly after the incident. The building that now stands in its place operates under a different name. The security footage described in this story has never been officially released, but copies circulate. Bootlegs traded in back alleys, whispered about in paranormal forums. The video of the girl who danced with the devil. If you find it, do not watch it alone. And do not watch it on Viernes Santo, because according to those who have seen it, the shadow in the video does not just dance with Lucia. At the very end, just before the footage cuts out, it turns toward the camera. It looks directly at whoever is watching, and it smiles, as if to say, I see you, I will find you, and when I do, we will dance. Do not look down, do not look down, do not look down. Tap, tap, tap. He is already here.